From the heart of South Asia to the crossroads of Central Asia, from the power corridors of the West to the turbulent Middle East and North Africa, where narratives collide, perspectives matter and stories connect. This is Beyond Borders and I'm Umar Khalid, but as is the norm with the show, today also will be no exception. We'll be bringing you and taking you in a world without borders and boundaries and discuss stories that are extremely pertinent in this changing 21st century. We'll begin with the top stories of the day, or as we call them, region lines. We start from Pakistan, where Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif has left for Davos to attend the 56th annual meeting of the World Economic Forum and discuss pressing economic and geopolitical challenges with the international stakeholders. The Prime Minister will also be chairing a Pakistan-specific high-level business roundtable with different corporate leaders. On the sidelines, the Prime Minister is expected to interact with several world leaders, including business executives. Moving on to the West, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen vows a firm and united response to US President's threats over Greenland, warning that such actions could strain long-standing transatlantic ties as Trump signals readiness for a meeting in Davos to discuss the Arctic island. Meanwhile, the North American Aerospace Defense Command says that the US military has sent an aircraft to Greenland's Pitofik space base amid rising tensions over President Donald Trump's push to acquire the self-governing Danish territory. Meanwhile, Russia launches a combined drone and missile attack on Ukraine, while Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says that Ukraine's armed forces are introducing a new air defense approach using small groups of interceptor drones. Lastly, Israeli authorities demolish an UNRWA building in occupied East Jerusalem, sparking international concern as the agency warns the move will disrupt essential education and humanitarian programs for Palestinian refugees. Also, a new storm is expected to hit Gaza, threatening to worsen conditions for thousands of displaced people who are already in a struggling position with several shortages of shelter, food and medical care. As global leaders converge in Davos at a time of rising geopolitical uncertainty and economic realignment, Pakistan is entering the conversation with confidence, clarity and constructive intent. Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif's participation in the World Economic Forum reflects Pakistan's renewed diplomatic engagement and reform-driven economic direction. By contributing to discussions on restoring dialogue in a divided world and chairing a Pakistan-focused business roundtable, Islamabad is directly engaging international investors and decision-makers with a clear message that Pakistan is stable, open for business and ready for long-term partnerships. Now, from trade expansions to investment facilitation and regional connectivity, Pakistan is projecting itself not merely as a market but as a strategic partner who is committed to peace, growth and responsible global cooperation. The World Economic Forum's Global Risks Report, also that has come out a few days back, warns that geo-economic confrontation is the world's top risk for 2026, with rising conflicts, misinformation and economic volatility threatening global stability. As trust in multilateral systems erodes and competition intensifies, the report suggests that dialogue and cooperation remain essential to prevent a fragmented and turbulent world order. Now, to discuss this, we've been joined by two pertinent guests. Let me introduce them to you one by one. Where we have been joined in the studios by Dr. Usman W. Chohan. He is, of course, one of the leading economists in Pakistan. Thank you very much, Usman, to have joined us. We have also been joined by Dr. Jamil Khan Sahab. He's a former ambassador and joins us online. And we have been joined by Osama Rizvi, who's an international economic analyst and joins us online as well. Osama, good to see you after quite a while. We'll begin with you, Usman Chohan. Pakistan's prominent engagement at Davos, what does it signal? Does it signal a growing international confidence in its economic stabilization or its reform trajectory, or is there more to it?
I believe that Pakistan is uniquely positioned in the World Economic Forum and the Davos context, broadly speaking. And the reason is that this is going to be the most important Davos engagement ever, because they're going to be talking about sovereignty like they've never have before. They're going to be talking about the international order that you mentioned. They're going to have real big picture conversations, not just the typical neoliberal platitudes we hear. That is unique. And why I think Pakistan is well positioned is that Pakistan enjoys good relations with China and the United States. Pakistan has shown that it is ready for the nice guy world and the tough guy world. We prefer the nice guy world with geoeconomics, connectivity, and that's what we're working towards. But the tough guy world, we showed in 2025 that we can defend ourselves.
True.
So if that Trump world of being a tough guy and bullying others, he is actually very impressed with Pakistan and sees it as a tough guy country. But Pakistan believes that it should be a nice guy world. So this hedging is so perfect that we could play a positive and meaningful role in the conversations of this unique get-together in Davos.
All right, I think that's very important to continue to have this conversation and involve themselves in a manner in which you are respected as well by the other global partners. Coming to you, Dr. Jamil, how significant is Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif's participation in this informal gathering of the World Economic Leaders session on restoring dialogue, especially at a time of global polarization and strategic rivalry?
Yeah, global polarization, strategic rivalries, turbulent time, and Iran, US, and Middle East problem, the supply chain problem, geo-economic problem, geopolitical problem, Greenland problem, Gaza problem. So all these things, under this backdrop, this World Economic Forum 56 session is taking place in Pakistan, as the other panelist was also mentioning, is quite well positioned. And Pakistan's image, Pakistan's foreign policy, and foreign Pakistan trajectory for the past, and particularly post Marka-e-Haq, it has really taken a very high trajectory, and the position which Pakistan now has, this is a time to really reap the fruits on the economic side, and the investment side, and the collaboration side, because this is the most important of all previous sessions of World Economic Forum. And why I'm saying so is almost about 3,000 world leaders. And this time, the 65 head of the government, head of the states, they are participating, as the reports indicate. And likewise, there are more than 850 top CEOs who are participating, top CEOs of the world corporate sector, civil society, and the theme is spirit of dialogue. So, and Donald Trump's speech is very interesting, and that really revolves the entire atmosphere of the session, I guess, would be revolving around it. And that he mentions about Gaza, he mentions about Greenland, and he mentions about the tariff, he mentions about the economic.
I think it's going to be a very interesting conversation. This is what I feel from different points of views, global points of views as well. Usama, can the Pakistan-specific high-level business roundtable translate diplomatic outreach into concrete foreign direct investment and technology partnerships?
Well, that's a very interesting question. And I think there are different aspects to this, right? First of all, our presence at Davos Forum, which is, of course, a very interesting forum and happening at a very peculiar, interesting time, is speaks a lot. So on the face of it, or apparently, Pakistan is doing pretty well by being a part of this, and we are leading some sessions as well. Also, Pakistan have had some good diplomatic wins in its pocket recently last year, and that would, of course, go a long way in positioning Pakistan as a good destination. But on the other hand, I would also like to remind ourselves with the crude reality that we face here on the ground. While I think indicators or situation has improved as compared to the recent lows that we suffered, there is still a long way to go. We have seen 7 or 8 multinationals leaving the country as well. The tax issue remains, and also reports from World Bank and Asian Development Bank also sort of calls for further reforms if there is to be a sustainable pathway towards progress and prosperity. So I think it's good. On one hand, it is good, glass half full, half empty sort of approach, but there is still a lot that needs to be done, specifically domestically. We still are an import-based economy. Therefore, anyone operating in the country, just for an example, would be at the whims of international geopolitical forces. Oil and gas inputs, energy costs, etc., goes a long way in bringing FDI in a country. So that is where I stand, somewhere in the middle.
All right, so you stand somewhere in the middle, but of course it's not just about Pakistan, it's about the global economy and all that is but pertinent to global economy and a successful global economy and how to move forward. Usman, how is Pakistan effectively repositioning itself, in your point of view, as a regional hub for trade activity and emerging market engagements?
It's been a priority for our leadership over the years that we have to reorient this region from one that has had a security paradigm exclusively to one that has a geoeconomic paradigm. That means that we need to push for connectivity and reconciliation, and Pakistan, for example, has sought time and time again with Afghanistan. Let's settle this, let's get along, and let's move trade across Central Asia down to the ocean. Similar with India, we actually have been saying that let's work together. There are things that are on the table, from TAPI to all this stuff. But they have a fascist government there. It's very hard to discuss logic with fascists. And so these things hold us back. The region is not in our control. The region is anarchic, as all states are in an anarchic system. They all are pushing different logics and different rationalities or irrationalities. But Pakistan is certainly in the team that says this world needs to calm down a little bit. Let's prioritize
All right, let's prioritize peace and let's see how this goes on along. Dr. Jamil, how important is Pakistan's narrative on peace and development in countering negative perceptions and attracting long-term global capital?
So Pakistan now is positioned in a crossroad where Pakistan so far has been able to navigate its position and navigate it at the most acceptable level globally that is navigating. And if Pakistan maintains this posture of its foreign policy, obviously Pakistan would attract more investment. Pakistan can attract more bilateral agreements. Pakistan can attract more preferential trade agreement and the free trade agreement. So Pakistan can enter into the various agreements, but at the same time, Pakistan has to really be strong and within its own country by reducing the cost of doing business and by reducing the tax slabs, because that is where the foreign investors and the multinational, even the local industries, they find it hard to really compete with neighboring countries like Bangladesh, Vietnam, and other countries, because in their countries, the tariff for the electricity, gas, and all the inputs of the industry, they are comparatively cheaper. So Pakistan has to find a way how really they have to really balance this and how to bring that convenience to the business and industries and industrial sector, and more importantly the multinational, so that they have to concurrently, like they are doing it magnificently well. They are doing it so well so far as the foreign engagement is concerned. Now how to really translate that and monetize that into the actual and real benefit, that's only possible if we have that much of goods and services available with us to really export. That's the name of the game, because if we keep having our import bills much higher than the export bill, about 60, 65 billion a year as against about 30, 35 billion. So we'll keep having that deficit. It's just we are quite lucky that we're having the remittances because of which we are going to have balance. So in a nutshell, the restructuring which government has started doing it in the country, I think once that starts bringing its results, we would have a better environment to really to improve our export and to really attract more multinationals, and the industries locally could expand. At the moment, they are really under a lot of stress to really maintain their position under these taxation and under these fiscal policy what we have, and under these tariff what they have of all the inputs in the industry.
Osama, I'd like to understand, do high-level interactions with world leaders and corporate executives enhance Pakistan's strategic visibility and diplomatic leverage? And how important is it under the current geopolitical or geostrategic circumstances?
Well, such forums does provide what is called convergence of access, right? 850 CEOs, 60, 70 heads of states, and so many forums. It gives you access to everything at one place. But then and the MOUs could be signed, different agreements can be signed, but then there is a string and array of follow-ups that actually makes the difference. So in terms of the first few steps, this is indeed a very important forum, as I said before as well. This would indeed prove a very positive step, and serve as another diplomatic win or a diplomatic step up in Pakistan's progress that we have been seeing in the previous year. But at the same time, we are facing some challenges. And I like to highlight that the local industry, for instance, the people, the trust deficit between the government and the people, specifically in terms of taxation, etc., it needs to be addressed urgently and substantially. For instance, I would also like to mention in terms of our region, we offer three things. One is the market, youngsters. We have youngsters, youth bulge, second highest youth bulge probably in the world. Second is the location, right? Geostrategic location. Third is supposed to be low energy cost. So if Pakistan, after these forums, if Pakistan can bring in more people, bring in more companies, and bank or build upon these three key strategic advantages, it can go a long way in making Pakistan's overall fiscal health better, because that is what we need right now. So once again, I would like, we become very emotional and we take a very short-term view at times of the things. It's really good, but I would like to see what follows after this, because that is what the follow-ups that is what is going to matter.
All right. Usman, in a competitive global investment environment, what differentiates Pakistan's value proposition for multinational investors today, now that we are at Davos and speaking to all of those heads and all of those heads of companies?
To be honest, the best thing that differentiates us from other countries and other markets is that it is a truly untapped big market. If you look at all the other major countries, they already have quite a dense presence of multinationals. In Pakistan, we don't have that big and we also have to develop local champions. That's the second thing. So partnerships of that. So you will be hard pressed to find a country that offers this much that is yet to be untapped. And investors are always looking for the percentage gain. It's not that you go into a saturated market and then just gain what is already done. In fact, you want to get the maximum curve of the value chain and value gains. The way to do that is to tap into something that has so much to offer that is untapped. Pakistan is that country, and that's how I would pitch Pakistan to any place, that there's so much here that yet has to be explored.
All right. Jamil Saab, can sustained participation in platforms like the World Economic Forum help institutionalize policy continuity, investor confidence, and economic credibility for Pakistan?
Indeed, the engagements at such a high forum, the highest, I would say, around the world so far as the business platform is concerned, where there is a spectrum of discussion, where there is a spectrum of leadership of both the business leadership, the societies, civil societies, the politicians. At this time, there's a very large number of politicians who are attending in it, in this forum. So the combination of all these three tier of the global society, I think that really harmonizes and that creates an environment to reap the fruits of it. Now, so far as Pakistan's position is concerned, a lot has been discussed by Mr. Rizvi. But then all these the engagements, what our Prime Minister is making, and the rapport which is being made on these platforms, whether during the meeting, during the main engagement with the session, or on the sidelines. And it's true that the MOUs, what we signed during these occasions, the follow-up, and then not even 15 to 20% MOUs are ever materialized. So that's very important that we have the follow-up of these MOUs and agreements. But more important thing is that our foreign policy trajectory and our engagement with at these platforms, are they in sync with what we are doing in the country? And some of it we have already discussed, and that is what way are we going to convince the world? Yes, we have an advantage. We have 60% of our population below the age of 30 years. That's a big asset. But have we been able to equip them with the required the certification, required vocational training, and required the qualification which is acceptable to these the multinational companies once they come. Because even under the CPEC or even the Chinese collaboration we having, Chinese and have been engaging with them, they find it very hard to hunt for the right talent for their industry. So Pakistan has to really align
I
itself.
understand the concerns, Jamil Saab. Usama, does the rise of geo-economic confrontation in the world, as we are seeing, signal a dangerous shift from cooperation towards economic weaponization among the major powers?
Well, indeed, there is a very interesting term these days. It's called minilateralism, not multilateralism, minilateralism. And it really puts in perspective whatever is happening around the world. What we mean by this term is that countries will now be supporting each other or have friends or enemies on certain issues. And then when the certain issue is resolved, or if not resolved, then they would, take different paths. So this represents a world where alliances would be shifting rapidly. We have also seen IMF and World Bank using the word fragmentation a lot. We are indeed living in a fragmented economy, whether it is on the basis of Israel versus Gaza, or whether we someone supports Russia or someone supports UN. If you look at the global greenfield investment (FDI), according to Bloomberg's recent reports, we have seen that economic decisions have been made not based on economic metrics, but based on political and political economic preferences. So that really speaks about how the global economy, the very global economy, has been weaponized. Not to mention how the energy, gas, oil prices, even solar, even critical minerals, rare earths, how that is being weaponized. So certainly this is a very unprecedented world that we are stepping into, full of challenges, but at the same time, lots of opportunities linger on as well.
That is true. Opportunities such as Davos. Thank you very much, Osama Rizvi. Thank you very much, Ambassador Jamil Ahmed Khan Sahab, to have joined us. Last question to you, Usman, concerns this increasingly multipolar and fragmented world that we continue to live in and see the changes every day. Can international institutions, like, for example, at Davos or at other fora, still effectively prevent conflict and instability?
It's very hard for them to do that. The reason is that you need stakeholder buy-in. But if we take this minilateralism or microlateralism angle, you'll see how contradictory it is and how terrible it is. Because take the example of Europe. When Venezuela's president gets kidnapped, Europe says, well, that's fine. When there's a genocide in Gaza, they mishmash depending on the country. Germany is not saying anything. But then when Greenland comes, they expect the world to be on their side. It is so contradictory because it's better to be guided in international relations by principles. The principle of sovereignty, of self-determination, of individual freedom, etc. There's so many principles that have formed the UN Charter. That's why I mentioned to you at the beginning that Pakistan is well hedged for both worlds, the tough guy and the nice guy world. For example, our dispute on Kashmir with India is based on self-determination. We want a plebiscite. This is very nice. But at the same time, there's that tough guy approach. They have nuclear weapons. We have nuclear weapons. We have an excellent air force, etc. The point is that it's better to have a nice guy, but then the whole world needs to accede to the charter and proceed accordingly, and then we can actually avoid the fate that our great-grandparents went through.
Well, let's hope that happens. Let's hope Davos proves to be that catalyst as far as this current situation is concerned. Thank you very much, Usman Chohan, to have joined us as well. Let's come now and take you to the West. Recent developments in Greenland reflect heightened geopolitical attention on the Arctic island's strategic position and defense arrangements. Now, Denmark has significantly increased its troop presence in Greenland, deploying hundreds of additional soldiers and military equipment to reinforce defense capabilities and participate in NATO-aligned exercises with European partners, including France, Germany, Sweden, and Norway. Now, at the same time, the US has also deployed aircraft to a Puftik space base with the North American Aerospace Defense Command, describing the movement as part of long-planned routine activities coordinated with Denmark. These developments occur amid a broader diplomatic backdrop in which discussions over Greenland's status, Arctic security cooperation, and allied relations continue. Denmark, Greenlandic authorities, and European partners have reaffirmed that Greenland's sovereignty resides with the Kingdom of Denmark and its people. To discuss that, we've been joined by three guests. Let me introduce them to you one by one. We've been joined by Shazia and Cheema Sahiba, who's a foreign affairs expert. We've been joined by Rizzuto Francesco, who's a professor of European law at Liverpool Hope University. And we've also been joined by Brigadier General retired Mark Kimmitt, former U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for Political Military Affairs. Thank you for all three of you to have joined us. I'll begin begin my conversation with Professor Rizzuto Francesco. Sir, what implications do Denmark's reinforced troop deployments in Greenland have for Arctic security cooperation among the NATO allies? How does the recent US aircraft deployment to Puftik space base reflect long-standing defense arrangements versus the current political tensions, and what role do joint military exercises with European nations also play in demonstrating collective defense commitments in the Arctic region?
Good afternoon from here, anyway. I think the security implications are basically nil in the sense that there is not an immediate security threat. Obviously, the United States has seen the deployment of Danish and other European reconnaissance troops, by the way, no more than around about 30, though the Danes have increased their presence by 150 or so with a couple of frigates. So the implications are none. This is frankly an issue of security that President Trump has decided to highlight because he wants to have Greenland, and he wants to have it now, though, you know, other than putting it on the agenda, there is no immediate threat. And obviously, there has been a reaction from the United States because, of course, the reaction of the American president is that this is an affront. This is an assault on the United States will, but the territory does not belong to the United States. And by the way, they have exercise after exercise, year after year in Greenland and in the general Arctic area. They've been having these for years.
All right, Mark Kimmitt, on to you. How are Denmark and Greenlandic authorities at the concerns over external interests in Greenland amid strategic competitions, and in what ways might intensified military activity in Greenland impact broader NATO cohesion and alliance dynamics?
Say two things. First of all, I don't believe the United States is prepared to take military action against NATO partners or against Greenland authorities. So I actually see increased NATO activities as a positive development because it is starting to focus NATO on the strategic importance, not simply for Donald Trump's America, but for NATO as well, as to the threats that are emerging from Russia and to an extent China in terms of the importance of that region.
All right. Coming to you, Professor Rizzuto Francesco, I'd like to understand, Donald Trump says an additional 10% import tariff would take effect on February the 1st on goods from Denmark, Norway, Sweden, France, Germany, the Netherlands, Finland, and Britain, all already subject to tariffs imposed by Donald Trump. These tariffs would increase to 25% on the 1st of June and would continue until a deal was reached for the US to purchase Greenland. Now, how does that change the dynamic between the EU and the US?
Well, I think it's profoundly changing the dynamics, not only between the EU and the United States, but it's also changing the dynamics within the European Union between states who feel they're going to suffer a little bit more as a consequence of these tariffs. And obviously, there's also a dispute about how we should retaliate. In other words, we Europeans, whether we should retaliate and at what stages. So this is, again, an attempt by President Trump to essentially bully and penalize people who don't see the world in quite the way he does, even though the Europeans now acknowledge that the Arctic is an important security area and will be an important security area in the future. But it's also about European interests in that region to do with minerals and other resources. So the idea that somehow Europe doesn't have a material interest there is also a mistake. So this is, again, it's spiraling into something that certainly the Europeans don't want, because actually the Americans have negotiated the terms of trade between the Europeans and the United States to the detriment of the Europeans. Remember the 15% tariff, increase in tariff that's already been agreed, though, by the way, the European Parliament has put that on hold in a way of saying to the United States, well, why are you doing this?
All right. Why are they doing it is a question. And Shazia, the next question is to you. What diplomatic mechanisms are being used, in your point of view, by European partners to support Denmark's position on Greenland sovereignty?
They don't have any diplomatic tools. They are not in position to do anything. And they are experiencing the textbook example of imperial hubris, which we in our part of the world have been witnessing for at least for last 70, 80 years. So yes, this is sad, but I don't think that they have anything in their toolbox because they have relied on US for the security. They have hollowed their economic structure for the sake of USA. And now when they are facing this thing, they are in the corner alone, and I don't practically see what they can do. The only thing is that they will figure out some way to give Greenland to USA and try to just have some kind of face keeping, some kind of lease, 100-year, or some kind of purchase or something and everything. I'm not advocating any of this, but the situation is very sad because the one thing which I'm very clear about the Trump, no matter how inconsistent he is in his rhetoric, he is very consistent about two things, and one is tariff and the other is Greenland, and he considers Greenland his legacy. He wants Greenland because if we connect the Greenland dot with the American security, the new security architect which they have introduced last month, they are talking about that they are not interested in NATO anymore because they are not sure that after 10 or 20 years NATO will be demographically aligned with their wide sphere, so they are not interested in that as well, and they consider Europe as a liability, so they just want to cut this umbilical cord, and they are doing it very painfully. They are not there is no security threat at all, and the sad part is that Europeans are singing this security threat mantra time and again, and they are tuning it with USA, and now they are facing this, that, and now they are saying no, there is no security threat, but this security threat is in the mainstream media, in their rhetoric, in their narrative, that China is attacking us and Russia is going to attack us, and now Trump is using it. But Trump wants Greenland because he wants to disconnect with the Europe and the NATO, and he wants to have that mega thing, and he wants to have that legacy, and he wants to secure the North Atlantic border, and he considers that America should have Greenland, and that's the American sphere, and the rest of the thing is not my concern. And you see, and the other thing is that in the American public, you don't see much of resistance about that. I think the mega crowd and the common American, they are also comfortable with that because they also think that Europe is a liability. So, and now this is time for Europe and to decide that why they have been participated in.
Europe to decide, that's an important question, and I'll ask Professor Francesco, how could evolving security priorities in the Arctic, in your point of view, influence Greenland's future political and economic relationships with the allied countries? What steps are being taken by NATO and Arctic Council members to balance territorial defense with cooperative engagement in the region? Is it going to continue the way it is, the way all the other analysts are saying? What should we expect?
I would like to just pick up on something your previous speaker said before I answer that question directly. I absolutely agree that the United States, and certainly this president, is making it crystal clear, not that the European Union is a liability or Europe is a liability, but that essentially he doesn't agree with our political direction, and he really wants us to become vassal states. Exactly what you said before. He doesn't give a damn about the Greenlanders, the Inuits, the people who live there, and so in a sense, this is the time for Europe to either wake up. We mustn't forget there are 450 million Europeans, and we are, after the United States, the strongest trading bloc and one of the richest trading blocs, and if you like, economic blocs in the globe. So he won't be able to push us around that much, because remember, there are public opinions in Europe as well, and to actually see our leaders without a backbone in the face of this American president is not doing them much good, except in one or two states, Hungary, Italy, perhaps. But as far as increasing security, look, the United States have had access to security and have access to the resources of Greenland, and they've had that access at least since 1951. So what the Europeans are trying to do is to placate Trump by playing this security agenda, knowing full well that you know, in a shooting war, well, there's no way we could face off with the United States. As far as defense dependency, by the way, I think in 3 or 4 years' time, the European Union will not be quite as weak as it is today in the states of the European Union. At the moment, the fear in Europe is that if we're too aggressive towards American neocolonialism and vassalization of European states, that he will abandon us vis-a-vis the Ukraine. But again, I think that that's a slight mistake, given that I don't believe that Russian tanks are going to arrive in Paris. And actually, the Europeans are now paying for everything in the Ukraine, i.e. financially, and we're having to buy American weapons in order to give to the Ukrainians, plus the fact that we're giving the Ukrainians a loan of nearly 100 billion. So this dependency argument, I think our political leaders need to kick the habit of this sort of dependency culture. Not because we want conflict with the United States, of course not, but they're caught between a rock and a hard place, really, in the kind of aggression that the Europeans are frankly not used to vis-a-vis the...
I agree with you on that. I agree with you on that. Thank you very much, Professor Rizzuto Francesco, to have joined us all the way from Liverpool, and thank you very much to have given us your valuable input as far as this important situation is concerned. Mark Kimmitt, how do you assess the strategic reasons behind the US's renewed focus on Greenland? What implications does this have for Arctic security dynamics?
Well, let's start at the beginning. We understand that there has been a warming of the Arctic Circle. The warming of the Arctic Circle has created new routes for ships, not simply icebreakers, but regular combatant ships to transgress the area from Russia into the strategic Iceland-UK gap, not simply for submarines, but now for surface ships. The significant amount of rare materials, rare earth materials, other critical materials in Greenland, as well as the strategic routes, means that Greenland is clearly in the sights of Russia as a strategic asset for it to control. So naturally, as part of the American defense posture and NATO defense posture, the United States wants to enhance its capability to defend Greenland from those threats.
Mark, what diplomatic or multilateral mechanisms could help de-escalate tensions while reinforcing transatlantic cooperation on Arctic security and climate challenges?
That's a very good question. Luckily, the diplomatic mechanisms are already in place, not simply the bilateral relationships that the United States has with Greenland, Denmark, and the individual nations, but we probably have the most comprehensive multilateral relationships with Europe, ranging from our participation in NATO, our participation as an observer status in the European Union, and a host of other fora that the United States can use for any type of negotiations and discussions on this issue that may come about.
Thank you very much, Mark, for this. Now let's take you to the Russia-Ukraine war that has entered its 1426th day. Kiev reports missile warnings, widespread drone attacks targeting Ukraine's energy infrastructure, causing power cuts, whereas there is, of course, a conflict on both the sides. Diplomatic channels seem to be open, but, there are a lot of question marks remaining on how things are going to move forward. Shazia and Cheema, how significant is Russia's continued targeting of energy infrastructure in shaping Ukraine's winter resilience and civilian stability?
Of course, it's very significant. There is no doubt about that. But it has amplified after the attack on Novigrad on the residence of Putin. So that drone residence last month, I think. So they have amplified these attacks. And now my information is that there is no electricity even in the big cities such as Kiev, and the cosmopolitan cities such as Kiev, having the buildings of multiple levels. It's very difficult for the people to stay there. And the mayor of Kiev has said that people should evacuate. But again, Zelensky, for the Western optics and the rhetoric and this stalemate in the war, doesn't want to leave the people to go there somewhere, some farms or some place where they can have the accessibility to water or some basic needs. So the situation is very bad. But again, who is there to solve or resolve this situation? If we look at Zelensky, he has the same mantra, and he knows that he has no way out of it. And the Europeans, they have also has dug this hole so deep that I don't see them, especially these current elite, the ruling class, that they have any way out of it, and they can transform it in a winning proposition. I don't see it. And again, the America, yes, it was the war, like to begin with. It was American venture, which again, as always, European jumped into it, and made it a NATO war. And now this is a losing proposition. The entire NATO is losing a war against Russia, and that's again a very bad thing to look at, to absorb, to digest. So, and the population is not prepared for that, because the media is not telling them the real story. And who else is going to tell them? I mean, whoever is going to tell them the real story is now recently being sanctioned.
Shazia and Cheema, there are so many versions of what the real story is. It depends on which side of the table you're sitting on. It all depends on that. Mark, I'll come to you. Zelensky talks about conflicts in the coming days coming from Russia, and more aggression coming from Russia. With Russia reportedly expanding drone production as well, does the conflict risk entering a more technology-intensive phase of warfare?
I think you are correct that technology is going to be more important than manpower, particularly during wintertime. As any soldier knows, the wintertime, unless the troops are particularly equipped to fight in very harsh rain, battles somewhat mitigate over those, and and the vehicles can't move forward. That's not stopping the skies. The drones can still push hard from Russia to Ukraine and vice versa. But not simply the drones, also the missiles and the rockets that are being fired by the Russians. So what the Russians are trying to do is maintain an operational tempo between the seasons that keeps pressure on President Zelensky and forces.
Mark, how vulnerable does Ukraine's energy and nuclear infrastructure remain despite some kind of partial restoration of power lines and gas flows?
I think the electrical systems are very vulnerable. It's been very, very clear that the Russians have no intention of ceasing their constant attack on power stations, power substations, fuel depots to power refining electrical stations. So that's going to continue. Oddly enough, on the nuclear facilities, I think that Russia, particularly watching the history of post-Chernobyl accident, will probably keep its hands off a Zaporizhia primarily to destroy it. I don't think either Ukraine nor intentional nuclear attack on the nuclear facility for fear of second and third order consequences like nuclear fallout.
All right. Thank you very much, General Mark Kimmitt, to have joined us, and thank you very much, Shazia and Cheema, also to have joined us to have discussed important issues that plague the world and, of course, the geopolitics and geostrategy of the global hemisphere as well. Let's take you now to the Middle East and North Africa. Now, the announcement of phase 2 of the Gaza ceasefire has, by, of course, US envoy Steve Witkoff, initially raised expectations of progress towards stability and reconstruction. The White House followed this by unveiling a new board of peace tasked with overseeing a technocratic committee to manage post-war governance in Gaza that was to be led by former Palestinian official Dr. Ali Shatta. However, on the ground in Gaza, optimism remains limited. Many residents perceive a disconnect between diplomatic announcements and daily realities marked by destruction, insecurity, and continued military activity. And let's hope, let's pray that better sense prevails and that ceasefire actually is applied in letter and principle to Gaza, and the rest of the conflicts that we have also been talking about also come to a logical and to a solution that is beneficial for the community at large. That is what we hope and pray for, and that is why we take the different perspectives from across the world in order to make you understand more of what is going on across the world. This brings you to the end, to the end of today's Beyond Borders. It has been an interesting journey today as well, and we'll continue to take you to different journeys every passing day between this time slot in which we'll bring you perspectives from across the world and make you think of how things are going across the world and what should be the logical conclusion for a world that should be peaceful for our future generations. Allah Hafiz.